Vince. They're really cracking down on safety belts these days.
What's up, officer?
I'm giving you a ticket for committing an 811.
Safety belt violation.
Compliments of Barney Fife.
We never wear safety belts. We're dummies.
Weisenheimers.
He gave us a ticket.
Man's got to do what he's got to do.
Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Lancaster Perspective. I'm Mike Miller, and my special guest today, the Honorable Tim Schaffer.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Good, buddy. How you doing?
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me back.
It's been a long time.
It has, and it's great to be back in the Ohio House of Representatives representing Fairfield County, and we're having a blast. We got a great leader in Speaker Cliff Rosenberger, good conservative leader, and we're having a great time and getting a lot of work done.
Let's go down memory lane for just a little bit. Start out when you first started in politics.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, what got you into politics?
Well, you know, what got me into politics is what gets most people into politics, and that is helping folks with campaigns, volunteering for campaigns, and I did that in 1984, first for Steve Williams. It was also a college class project for credit, and you know, I spent the summer with Steve and his family as they campaigned throughout the House district at that time, and it took off from there, and had a great mentor there, and you know, here we are in the House today in 2015.
Do you look back during the early days and think, boy, this helped me now?
Mentors like Steve and like many others. You got to have great mentors to teach you how to campaign, that kind of thing, and plus issue management. You got to learn the issues from somebody you trust and somebody who has good judgment. So issue development, learning what your people need. How do you represent Fairfield County? How do you go about that? How do you learn what people need in their lives and their businesses? So a lot of that is, you pick that up from a lot of folks, and you really got to study that.
You keep in touch with everyone quite often. I mean, you're always in correspondence with somebody. At some point in time, do you think there's an easy way to do this? I mean,
well, you know, the internet has made a lot of information available, but there's nothing really that takes the place of just a handshake and a conversation. I have a favorite restaurant that I hold my meetings in because we don't have district offices in the Ohio House, in the state legislature. So the person-to-person contact, I think, is by far the most important thing, because that's where you really communicate with people, and people feel they can tell you their issues and problems that you can help out on.
One of the things that is important in Ohio is economics and economic development, and unemployment's down right now just a little bit. But talk a little bit about, I guess, the dashboard of economics.
Sure. In Ohio, we really are leading the Midwest as well as most of the country in new jobs development, as well as getting that unemployment rate down. We've gone down almost 4% in the last 4 years, and that's pretty remarkable, being for an upper Midwest state. And I think a lot of that is due to the tax cuts and the aggressive pro-business, pro-jobs agenda we've had in the state of Ohio for the last several years. It's working. The jobs are coming to Ohio, and people are getting jobs. We still have a lot of work to do yet. There's still a lot of families out there with 2 or 3 part-time jobs trying to make it, but we have made a lot of progress.
I think in the last couple of years we've developed, or the state has developed, just about 400,000 new jobs, something like that. Yeah,
it really is remarkable. We're climbing that ladder. We're making sure that all the jobs we lost in the prior recession we're gaining back, and it is working. A lot of states are having a comeback like that, but there aren't very many that are coming back as strong as Ohio is, and that's really good news. And here in Central Ohio, you've seen in the media that there are always a lot of announcements. Almost every week there's an announcement of another company either having a major expansion in Central Ohio or a new company coming here. And that's all good news. And whether that company actually lands in Fairfield or Franklin or Licking County, they're all within driving distance of folks that live here, and that's really good news.
One of the people always talk about is the budget, and we talk about the tax policies, and I know there's a couple of House bills that you've been involved with.
Yeah, well, we just passed in June House Bill 64, which is the state operating budget. That's the big budget that pays for most everything we do, everything but roads and bridges and a few other things. And this is the 3rd consecutive budget that we have been able to cut taxes in. and we have slashed taxes again for the coming tax year. 6.3% income tax cut alone for all Ohioans. No matter how much you make, no matter where you are on the list, you're getting a 6.3 cut in income taxes.
From just a political science standpoint, how hard was that to do? I mean,
You know,
it was just like
you
midnight sessions and weekends.
Well, you know, that's a great question, because these budgets never end up where we started out at. You know, you start out trying to wiggle some different numbers and figure out how we can cut taxes, how we can put more money in people's pockets, how we can make sure that business in Fairfield County are keeping more of their money instead of sending it to Columbus. And, you know, by the time that sausage is done and it's gone through the grinder, and it's a lot of midnight oil sometimes, you do want to make sure that you still maintain a tax cut and maybe even improve it by the time everybody's gotten their dibs in. But yeah, it is an amazing process to watch, but what we ended up with this time was we thought we could do a 6.3 income tax cut plus a huge small business tax cut. This taxable year we're letting small business deduct 75% of their income from their tax form. Next year it'll be a 100% deduction. Up to $250,000 of income,
So,
and that's huge. That will help create jobs.
absolutely. Why the difference? I mean, why not do 100% now? I mean, it's just...
Well, if we could do 100% immediately, we would, but we need the growth of the economy also to help pay for state operations. So we thought we could hit 75% this year and bump that up to 100% next year, and that's what we want to stick to. And if we have to tighten our belts, we have to tighten our belts. But it's really important that entrepreneurs, small business people feel like they've got more of their money to keep out there and plow back into their businesses. You know, if they buy a piece of equipment, that means they have to hire somebody to run it. Right. So this is all about jobs development, bringing jobs.
And I know, just following your record to the Senate and the House, you've actually voted for a lot of reduction in taxes. I mean, billions.
Quite a few, yes. Going back to 2005, when we set up, in the prior years before that, we set up our ability to make a major 21% income tax cut at that time. So in the last decade or so, it's been a real pleasure to be able to work with the numbers and work with the state government and work with all the agencies to figure out how we can tighten this belt and at the same time make tax revenue based on a growing economy. You know, the way to stop the growing economy, the way to go back into recession is to raise taxes, and we sure don't want to do that.
I know, just in general, when working on different committees, what committees do you want?
Well, I chair Public Utilities Committee, and also I just got appointed to Education Committee, and we had some movement in the House membership there, and so the Speaker put me on the Education Committee. Also serve on the Ways and Means, which is the tax committee where we calculate all these numbers and see how much we can cut taxes and how we do it and that kind of thing. So, and plus agriculture and rural development. That committee was on the road this week.
That's a lot to do.
We've taken our committee hearings this summer during our district work sessions and held committee hearings all over the state. I've been to Northwest, Northeast, now South this week. Put 300 or 400 miles on Wednesday on my car, and that was I think I spent more time on the highway than I did in the committee hearing, but that was really helpful. We had a lot of witnesses, some local farmers come in, local rural development experts. Dr. DeBruin from Millersport came in. He drove down and gave us some testimony. So it was very much worth it.
Do you find more people are interested in politics now? I mean, generations, you know, that your father and my father and my brother, I mean, are you finding more people are interested?
I think so, because a lot of the media that are available out there, the internet, has certainly made a lot of different information available to us 24/7. I mean, how many of us are on the internet on our phones or on the computer at midnight, you know, checking something out? It is amazing what you can do now, what information you can get. But also, I think people, you know, they're not just concerned about the White House and Congress, but they're also concerned about local politics and making sure that their tax revenues, and at the same time that they are providing services to those that need it, that these things are all happening the way they should. And I'm really proud of what we've been able to do in the state of Ohio and our local government.
Contact information if people want to get a hold of you, email, phone numbers?
Sure. Oh, well, I'm right here in Lancaster, 654-0007. That's my home number. We don't have offices in the district, so we don't have a budget for that. So my wife and I serve as the legislative aide and legislator and secretary all together. Then if you want to talk to my staff and schedule something, 614-466-8100. And that's been Fairfield County's House District phone number for as long as I remember, back in the 80s and before, 466-8100.
Continuing talking about people in politics, and do you get more people that ask you questions where before? What has changed in the last 10 years, maybe 15 years, where maybe not got as many questions, now you're getting more?
You know, I think I get more, and I get more in-depth questions. And I think that's a lot because of the internet and things that are available at the fingertips. I mean, you can be almost anywhere in the world and find out what's happening here in Lancaster, Ohio. And so people are more educated. They have more access to that information. So the questions that we get are usually more sophisticated than they were 10 or 20 years ago. People already know some background. They already know, they might know how you voted on an issue already, whereas before they might have to call and ask, and then they start the conversation. So yeah, I think the information explosion, the information revolution has really empowered constituents.
Well, I want to go back to taxes for just a second, because we've talked about different taxes and formulas and those things, but you were involved in a tax policy study commission. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, in the budget this year, we put it, because you know you don't every year want to just chip away at the tax code here and there and not really get a whole view of the entire code, because that could be a dangerous thing no matter what endeavor you're in.
And the code is what, that thing?
More like this thing. So we established the 2020 Tax Policy Study Commission to make sure that we're looking at the whole tax code as an entire animal, so that we know that when we move this part, these parts move. And we want to make sure that if we do move that part, these parts we were anticipating and what we want to move and not unanticipated. So that, you know, we want to make sure we're managing the tax code properly, and that when we do cut the taxes, that it doesn't have some unintended consequences somewhere else.
I know one thing you're very active in is education. And talk a little bit about, I know there's new schools in Lancaster and other counties. Talk a little bit about education.
Sure. We're opening, well, we've already opened, but we are dedicating several schools last week and this week here in Lancaster. That's a great partnership with the state of Ohio. The state of Ohio has pumped some money into Lancaster schools. The taxpayers in the Lancaster School District voted to go with that partnership, and that's been a wonderful partnership. Millions and millions of dollars. Statewide, it's been over $11 billion that we have put into school buildings and facilities to make sure our kids are in good, safe schools, great learning facilities. And Ohio clearly has the best school system, physical facilities in the country right now. We have really gone a long way there. And in this budget also, we made sure, and one of my pledges has been to always vote for budgets that have increases in school funding. I want to make sure that we're doing right by the DeRolf decision and doing right by what our constituents expect. And so this 2-year budget, we put another $850 million in for school operations, in addition to the buildings.
Right. $850 million.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep, wow. Statewide.
Now, I'm just going to ask, what kind of discussions did you have on that? I mean, was that everybody?
Well, you know, it's amazing. I'm not the only one that holds that philosophy. There are a number of us who want to make sure we're increasing school funding as best as we can. Again, we don't want to break the piggy bank and think, well, we're going to have more money coming in than we thought we would. But all within reason. We thought we could do $850 million this 2-year period, and so far it's working. The economy is still percolating quite well. As long as the economy goes well and those revenues are coming in, even with the tax cuts, we'll be able to do that. Because you have to invest in our education system to produce the bright, shiny workers of the next generation. And that's one thing a lot of companies tell us. Yeah, I'd love to come to Ohio, but you know, this county that we've picked, you know, you've got a very low unemployment, so we're concerned about being able to get workers. And the workers we do get, we want to be able to train or come to the table with knowledge already. We got to make sure that these kids get a first-class education to compete with other states and other countries.
And that was it's a good lead-in. Freeze on tuition, I know, has been a topic a lot of people have discussed.
Yeah, our state university's tuition has just skyrocketed in the last 20 years, just gone way above the rate of inflation. And I think you know, we can talk all day about why and how did that happen and what are the contributing factors. Bottom line is, in this budget, we told the state universities, keep it flat. don't increase your tuition. You got to keep this flat. The cost of an education at one of our state universities is just outstripping everything else in this state. And there are families and kids that are encumbering themselves with huge debt just for a bachelor's degree. And you know, we got to make sure we get a handle on that, and we ask the universities to be disciplined about that as well. And so they've actually agreed to study how they can reduce their cost by 5% in the next several years. So that's a real good advance. They came to the table, and they recognize too that a lot of families and kids are being saddled with this intense debt. They don't want to see that happen, because I think they know what will happen in the marketplace. So they've come to the table quite well.
We talked earlier about internet and modern day internet, and you've introduced a bill about internet predators.
Yes, yeah. If you recall, about 8 years ago, I did a bill, passed a piece of legislation that required mandatory prison time for internet predators. Folks who prowl on the internet looking for minors and soliciting those minors, which is importuning.
Right.
And some liberal judges in Ohio, and we have one in Franklin County, have found a way around the intent of that bill, the intent of that legislation, and have been letting a lot of these predators off with no prison time. And these are dangerous predators. They admitted to the prosecutor in Butler County years ago that although they were caught that first time, that they have probably importuned at least 30 children up to that point. So when they get caught and they say, well, this is my first time, chances are it's not. There have been dozens of victims already. We've got to stop this. We've got to put these people in prison and help them get their lives straightened out, help them get them the counseling or whatever they need. But at the very least, get them off the streets and get them out of our neighborhoods and away from the computer, and make sure that they're not harming our children.
Well, a hot topic is always drug testing for different individuals. You've introduced one, drug testing for welfare recipients.
Sure. This is a bill I've worked on for a few years, and I brought on a joint sponsor from Southwest Ohio, Representative Ron Mag, and together we have introduced this legislation which would require a drug test for those receiving Ohio Works First benefits. And it's an important thing that, you know, we've always known intuitively, and I've heard from caseworkers and police officers who are busting drug houses that they're finding large amounts of cash and other public assistance cards, food cards, and some Ohio Works First resources in these drug houses. So we want to make sure that we're not diverting taxpayer money to the drug dealer instead of getting the benefit to the kids and the dependents in those families that need that money desperately. So we've reintroduced that legislation about a month ago. The response has been wonderful. It's been tremendous. And we've made some changes in it to make sure that we're taking care of those families, taking care of those kids. And we've got it locked down pretty tightly to where they will be taken care of.
Is it, take us through the process in co-sponsoring bill, writing a bill with somebody, getting involved. I mean, is it, let's get together for 6 weeks and figure this out? I mean, just take us through it for the average individual that has no idea how to introduce a bill.
It takes a lot of time. You got to get the idea, and then we send it to the lawyers to draft up, and they draft up a document, the bill in proper legal language, and then the lawyers at the state tell us whether they think it's constitutional or not. And that's real critical, because you don't want to pass a bill that'll just be immediately thrown out in court. And take this drug testing bill, for example. There are some other states, the state up north, which I don't name, and Florida. Yeah, it is football season.
Yeah, you're right.
And in Florida, the initial bills that they passed were unconstitutional. They got thrown out pretty quickly. So we don't want to play that game. So what we did was we watched some other states, and Missouri really pioneered a new method in that, on the drug testing bill, for example. What they did was they came up with a new idea, which we've incorporated in our bill and made some changes, where we make sure that the drug test isn't required up front, but we just do a drug screening. And so our experts would tell us whether or not that person has a propensity for drug use. So you do the research like that. Once you get it all drawn up and in legal form, you circulate it to your colleagues, and they jump on, if they want to, as a co-sponsor. And so they can be a real asset. They can help you pass the bill, and they can help you with research.
That was my question. Is it sometimes you're thinking, well, I never thought they'd want to do this. I I mean, is that or just...
Sometimes that surprises you.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was in the Senate and I did the drug testing bill, I had some Democrats that came on board that I never would have dreamed would have supported the bill. But in one lady's situation, she told me, I grew up in a neighborhood where this was going on. And I don't want other kids to have to go through that. So it is amazing the different co-sponsors you'll get. But the more co-sponsors generally, the better, because it shows more support. And so then you introduce the bill, and it starts the committee process. And you want to get 3 hearings at least. Give people in Ohio a chance to come to testify if they want to, or send a letter in, or make a phone call to us. You don't want to rush anything through.
Right.
And then once it passes committee, it goes to the House floor.
Then the fun begins.
Yeah, then the fun can begin, yeah.
And
You can see fireworks at that point.
You have 2 other bills, one involving Civil War relics and then township force accounts. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. The first one, the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War came to me a couple years ago and told me that, and I had no idea this was happening, that we were losing a lot of the relics, a lot of the cannon from the Civil War, either being sold for scrap or being sold on the private market or whatever. And they're really concerned because those relics are the property of the Sons of Union Veterans, which those things were deeded over by Congress several decades ago. So we want to make sure that we are not losing these physical items that remind us of that war and the effort that went into it to preserve this union. So we're introducing legislation that will put some requirements on particularly cemeteries and local governments before they sell or give away a cannon or some other major relic. We have had some government-owned cemeteries in Ohio who have sold cannon for scrap. And I can't imagine, like here in Lancaster, we have one of the cannon that was in the Sherman Army, General Sherman's Army. What would people say if somebody proposed selling that for scrap one day? Well, we just put several $1,000s into redoing that cannon and bringing it up. So we need to protect these relics and make sure we preserve them.
Township force accounts.
Township force accounts are basically, in brief, the dollar limit that townships are allowed to do their own construction and reconstruction of roads and bridges. And it's been a very, very low level for a long, long time. And when they can't do their own repairs, then they have to send it out to bid, and the price goes up. So on a small project, we think it's, and this has a lot of co-sponsors on it, we think it's reasonable that the townships, when they have the equipment and the expertise, they can repair their own roads and bridges. They don't have to contract it out for more money. That gets into a lot of contracting things that then raises the cost. It's not going to break anybody's piggy bank in the contracting industry, but yet it'll allow the townships to do more of their own repairs at a cheaper cost for the taxpayer.
Just in an average, let's say a week, I mean 40 hours is out of the question. I mean, how much time do you actually, are you doing this all 7 days a week?
Oh yeah, it's a 7-day-a-week job. You got to love it, and you got to love the place you live and the people that you live with to do this. But there are a lot of rewards to it as well. There's no doubt about it. When you have a victory on a piece of legislation, or you've helped a family get some benefits that they desperately need, those are things that don't sometimes make headlines. But you go home realizing, boy, you really helped somebody today, and that's really important.
No names examples, but has anybody ever called you and said, I'd like to do this? You're thinking, no, we can't do that.
I've had some cases where I thought to myself, wow, this is a big lift. This is a tall order. But I tell you, that's when you go to your colleagues. That's when you pull in the relationships that you've built over the years, and you call in the troops. You call in some backup, and yeah, we've gotten some amazing stuff done over the years like that. Absolutely, no doubt about it. I remember one case where a business with over 100 employees in Southeast Ohio had a real problem, and we went to the state bureaucracy and begged and pleaded, and I just basically said, if you don't help us on this issue, there are going to be 120 some, 150 some pink slips going out next week. And the state of Ohio came to the table and helped us. And that was really good to see that we all work together and make sure that, and that business is still operating today.
What's Tim Schaffer doing in spare time? I mean, golf, fish.
Politics. Go to Crew game.
Go to Crew game, there you go.
A big Columbus Crew fan. And also might take in an Ohio State football game once or twice a season.
You know, at the time of this taping, they're playing, I think, Hawaii this week. And I mean, you bleed scarlet and gray, or I mean.
You know, I bleed purple and white from Mount Union.
Yeah.
That's the premier football college in Ohio, I think. But Ohio State's a close second. But there's nothing like going to that stadium with 100,000 plus in it and seeing the pride of Ohio out there and the band. And it is an experience. It is an experience.
We just have a few minutes left, Tim. It's been great having you on, giving us an update. Anything on the horizon coming up that's a new bill that you're looking at?
Lots of legislation. We're always working on more legislation. I do have one coming that I'm working with another state representative on that will, in the long term, reel in higher education costs. And that one will be announced in the next couple of weeks, I believe. It's being written and reviewed by the lawyers now. Sometimes the ideas are great, and then they get a hold of it, and okay, we have to work through this constitutional issue. But yeah, you're going to see this bill attract some attention, public attention, and a lot of higher education attention, and families who are having a hard time paying for their higher education. So it'll be a good, positive bill for everybody.
Well, Tim, again, one more time, contact information in case people want to get hold of
Home is 654-0007, and I always tell folks, don't hesitate to call me at home. That's my job.
That's what I did, folks. I called them at home.
That's right. Or the office, and I've got great staff who can really give you a lot of good information, 614-466-8100.
Fantastic. Once again, we appreciate you coming in, giving us an update, and we'll have you back on and
Sure.
some more updates.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Lancaster Perspective. I'm Mike Miller, and remember, until we meet again, let's make a difference.
And pioneered what is now called outsourcing. And the Sidwells wanted a community that had a lot of churches, had a lot of soccer opportunities where kids love soccer, and a good Parks and Rec department, so they chose Lancaster. And so in 1980, they moved the franchise here in Lancaster, to 6th Avenue. But then in 2002, Todd George, current owner, purchased the franchise from them. And in 2004, he bought a building that's on Mulberry Street, and that's where the franchise is located currently. I'm Jay Johnson, General Manager of Service Master Clean by Todd George, where we guarantee if it's not done right the first time, we'll do it again.
Service Master Clean by Todd George, 740-687-1077, 740-687-1077.